In 2002, 22 employees left game developer 2015, the company behind EA's award-winning Medal of Honor Allied Assault. With one of the most highly acclaimed World War II PC games on their resume, that band of 22 developers settled down and founded Infinity Ward. Wasting no time, they began development of Call of Duty, making sure to incorporate lessons learned from their experiences with Medal of Honor. A short year after the studio's creation, Call of Duty was released to the public on October 29, 2003. That month, Infinity Ward was also acquired by video game publishing giant Activision. When Call of Duty hit store shelves, it exceeded PC gamers' expectations. Scoring a 91% average on Metacritic, Call of Duty earned multiple Game of the Year awards. The growth between Allied Assault and Call of Duty was impressive. While both games are World War II shooters, Call of Duty seemed to hold a different personal mantra than Allied Assault. Allied Assault was the tale of how one man changed the war single-handedly. Call of Duty was the tale of how the war could have only been won by relying on his brothers in arms. Aside from the massive graphical and audio improvements over its spiritual predecessor, Call of Duty was a game of a lot of firsts. It was one of the earliest first-person shooters where players could improve their aim by using the iron sights on their guns.
Martin, Elder, give me covering fire!
It was also one of the first games where players could melee the enemy, using almost any weapon in their arsenal. It was also the first time gamers would go into short-term shock when an explosive round would go off nearby, a stylistic technique that has been used in every single Call of Duty ever since in an attempt to simulate the intensity of combat. In a slightly unexpected turn, players not only controlled Americans in their struggle against Nazi Germany, but also Soviet and British forces in historically inspired missions. Most of the playable missions by the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment of the 101st Airborne Division were inspired by actual events. The story of the 506 starts with their training in Camp Toccoa, Georgia, continues through their midnight D-Day landing at Sainte-Mère-Église in Normandy, and all the way up to their conflict in Bastogne in Belgium. The British also started their campaign on D-Day, following the exploits of the 6th Airborne Division as they successfully captured and defended Pegasus Bridge in a midnight glider landing. The fight for Pegasus Bridge was recreated with startling realism. Infinity Ward made sure to recreate the bridge as closely as they could as it existed in 1944. And the events, though they were altered slightly to make it more suitable for a video game, allowed players a unique opportunity to experience a pivotal point in history. In order to weave a more personal story into Call of Duty, most of the British campaign was fictionalized, particularly the missions focusing on the exploits of Captain Price, a paratrooper with the 6th Airborne Division. Infinity Ward loved Captain Price so much, they brought him and his outrageous facial hair back for Call of Duty 2, Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, and Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. After Pegasus, the British campaign follows Captain Price and Sergeant Evans as they're transferred to the SAS. They undertake secret missions destroying the aerial defenses on Ytter Dam in Germany to make way for aerial bombing runs by the RAF. And later, they infiltrate the German battleship Tirpitz in the Norwegian Sea. The Soviet campaign missions had players fighting for their survival while retaking Stalingrad from the Nazis in 1942. Later, they overtake German war factories in the Vistula Oder offensive, and in the very final mission, they push the German forces all the way back to Berlin and take control of the Reichstag. While heavily focusing on the realistic and the historically accurate, the original Call of Duty displayed some inspirational roots in film and television. The American campaign is clearly influenced by the 1998 film Saving Private Ryan and the 2001 HBO series Band of Brothers, the latter of which was also the story of the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment. Further inspiration was drawn from such films as 1962's The Longest Day, 1955's The Dam Busters, and 2001's Enemy at the Gates. Many talented voice actors were hired to make Call of Duty a reality, like Steve Blum and Michael Gough. But Hollywood screen actors also joined the fray, like Jason Statham, who played the British NCO, Sergeant Waters.
All right, settle down. We got new orders straight from SOE, as well as 2 new transfers from the 6th Airborne to help us carry them out. They were highly recommended for this operation as a result of their actions on D-Day. Captain Price, Sergeant Evans, welcome to 3 Troop. Now, let's get down to business.
And Giovanni Ribisi, who played Private Elder in the American campaign.
Take 5, but stay put.
Okie doke, Sarge. What the hell else am I gonna do?
Because of its runaway success, there was no doubt in anyone's mind that Call of Duty was the start of a new franchise, and it certainly has inspired its fair share of clones. The improvements it made on the first-person shooter genre are still apparent today, but no one at the time could have predicted just how large the series would grow. In 2009, Call of Duty received an HD remake, which was included in copies of the hardened and the prestige editions of Modern Warfare 2. It was later released on the PlayStation Network and Xbox Live Arcade for all to enjoy.
Comrades, check your back and harden your hearts. We must stand our ground and drive the fascists out of the motherland.
Over a year after Call of Duty's original release, Grey Matter Interactive, along with contributions from Pi Studios, released Call of Duty United Offensive, the first and only official expansion for Call of Duty. Once again, the story was split into 3 separate factions: the Americans, the British, and the Soviets. The American story campaign picks up right where Call of Duty left off in the forests of Bastogne, and tosses the player into a more visceral war than what was experienced in the original title. The overall timeline is shorter, but it provides gamers a story that is slightly easier to follow since it deals largely with one conflict instead of bouncing from one battle to another.
Alright, we have to disable this guy.
The British campaign follows the war story of Sergeant Doyle, who was originally an RAF B-17 Flying Fortress gunner, but after getting shot down, he's rescued by and recruited into the British Special Operations Executive, the forerunner of MI6. The story is an absolute stretch in terms of believability and historical accuracy, but in order to provide some variety in gameplay, Grey Matter was forced to resort to dramatic license.
You can come down now. He won't give you any more trouble.
Many long-running Call of Duty fans still refer to the B-17 level as one of the best in the entire series. It is clearly the spiritual father for some of Call of Duty's rail shooting levels that could be found later in the series. And, once again, players can find the influence Hollywood has on the Call of Duty series by looking at 1990's Memphis Belle. The Soviet campaign takes soldiers out of the snow and puts them into the trenches as the Germans are continually forced back by the sheer might of the Red Army. Once again, players can control Soviet tanks against Nazi panzer tanks, and in a finale, the Soviet forces defend the train station in Kharkov until reinforcements arrive.
Yes, Commander, yes!
The graphics are slightly improved upon, and at any given time, there are more soldiers on the screen, but quite possibly the greatest graphical improvement between United Offensive and the original Call of Duty is the size of the playable field. Some of the weapons in United Offensive were reskinned for better or worse. 3 new features were added to the Call of Duty franchise that for some reason or another weren't re-implemented until later in the series. Players were given the ability to sprint at the expense of using their weapons. New weapons were made available, like the flamethrower,
I need backup. We're changing
and for the first time ever, players were able to carry and reposition deployable machine guns, like the M1919 Browning 30 caliber machine gun and the Mauser MG34 machine gun. While the original Call of Duty offered very little differences from the Medal of Honor series in terms of multiplayer experiences, United Offensive took a bold step forward by granting players a ranking system. As gamers rose in the ranks, they unlocked new benefits and perks. There are still active games and servers that can be found today. United Offensive scored high ratings across the board with an 87% on Metacritic. Unfortunately, it was developed and marketed as an expansion pack, and it could never receive the same sales figures as the original Call of Duty. In terms of content, United Offensive offered gamers almost as much playtime as the original. In hindsight, the game could have easily stood on its own. But with all the new features it offered, this title will go down in video game history as the hidden gem in the series.